I'm 76 years old, and I need to tell you about the worst thing I ever did. Not the kind of wrong you go to jail for, the kind that eats at you every single day for 38 years. At 38, I was married, successful, and completely empty inside. And when someone showed up who actually saw me, who loved the parts of myself I'd buried under responsibility and expectation, I did what terrified people do. I ran. I ghosted her. Just stopped answering calls, avoided places we'd meet, pretended she didn't exist, and I told myself I was doing the right thing, being responsible, protecting my family. But here's what nobody tells you about running from love. Life doesn't let you off that easy. You think you're getting away with something. You're not. You're just signing up for a different kind of punishment, one that lasts decades and shows up in ways you never expected. What happened next changed everything I thought I understood about choices, consequences, and what we actually owe each other. Her name was Rachel. We met at a community theater group I joined on a whim, one of those midlife crisis things where you try to remember who you were before mortgages and middle management. She was 34, recently divorced, and had this way of laughing that made you feel like you'd said the funniest thing in the world. We were just friends at first. At least that's what I told myself. But somewhere between rehearsals and late night conversations about the lives we'd imagined versus the lives we were living, it became more, not physically. I never cheated on my wife that way, but emotionally I was gone, completely invested in someone who wasn't my spouse. And Rachel loved me. Not the version of me that showed up to the office or coached Little League. She loved the guy who wrote bad poetry at 23 and wanted to live in a van and photograph national parks. The person I'd completely abandoned to become respectable. For 6 months, I lived in this impossible space, married but emotionally somewhere else entirely. And then one Tuesday in March of 1986, I made a decision. I didn't break up with her. I didn't have an honest conversation. I just stopped calling, stopped showing up to rehearsals. When she came to my office, I told my secretary I wasn't available. I ghosted her before ghosting was even a term, and I told myself I was being noble, protecting my marriage, doing the right thing. I was 38 years old, and I genuinely believed running away without explanation was somehow honorable. Here's the lie we tell ourselves when we're scared, that disappearing is kinder than confrontation, that if we just remove ourselves quietly enough, everyone will move on and forget, that the people we hurt without explanation will somehow understand and find peace. We believe this because it makes cowardice feel like compassion, because actually facing someone and owning your choices, that requires courage most of us don't have. So we convince ourselves that silence is mercy, that vanishing is protection, and society reinforces this. How many songs celebrate the person who knew when to walk away? How many movies romanticize the protagonist who leaves in the middle of the night to spare someone pain? We built an entire mythology around conflict avoidance being wisdom. But it's not wisdom, it's just fear dressed up in poetry. My wife and I stayed married another 14 years, not because ghosting Rachel saved anything, but because we were both too stubborn to admit failure. We became roommates who occasionally argued about whose turn it was to take out the trash. She eventually had an affair. I found out in 9999999, and at 3 but said nothing because what moral ground did I have to stand on? We divorced in 2000, 24 years of marriage. And the sickest part, I spent those years thinking about Rachel, wondering what happened to her, telling myself it had all been for the best. I didn't find out the truth. Until 2004, I ran into someone from that old theater group at a coffee shop. Casual conversation. Whatever happened to Rachel? I asked, trying to sound merely curious. He looked at me weird. You didn't hear? She killed herself back in '89, 3 years after I disappeared. I felt the floor drop out. Apparently, after I vanished, she'd spiraled. Depression she'd been managing came roaring back. She'd tried reaching out to mutual friends, but I'd avoided them all so thoroughly she had no way to get closure, no way to understand what she'd done wrong. Started drinking heavily, lost her job, and one night in November of 1989, she took a bottle of pills and didn't wake up. Now, I don't know if I caused that. I can't claim that level of importance. Mental illness is complex. But I do know this. I disappeared on someone who loved me without any explanation. And she spent 3 years with no closure, no understanding, just abandonment. And that contributed to her death? There's no version of this story where I don't carry that weight. Then there's my daughter. Emily's 46 now. When she was 19, she came to me crying. Her first serious boyfriend had ghosted her, just stopped responding to texts and calls after 8 months together. She was devastated, couldn't understand what she'd done wrong, kept replaying every conversation trying to find her mistake. And I, the person who could have told her the truth, that this had nothing to do with her worth. I said nothing, just gave her generic advice about his loss and plenty of fish. Because admitting I'd done the exact same thing would have required confessing to Rachel, admitting I was a coward. Emily spent 2 years in therapy working through that. Abandonment, developed anxiety around relationships that took a decade to overcome. I could have helped her understand, could have used my own terrible choice to give her perspective. But I chose protecting my secret over helping my daughter heal. Some father. Here's what I know now at 76 that I didn't understand at 38. The person you hurt by avoiding hard conversations is yourself. Rachel deserved an honest conversation. My wife deserved an honest conversation about why our marriage was dying. My daughter deserved my truth when she was hurting. But I was so terrified of being seen as the bad guy, so desperate to preserve some image of myself as decent, that I chose comfortable dishonesty over uncomfortable truth every single time. and that choice poisoned everything. You don't get away with cowardice. You just spread it out over decades. Every relationship becomes slightly more distant because you're hiding pieces of yourself. Every conflict gets avoided until it explodes. Every hard truth gets buried until it rots everything from the inside. I thought ghosting Rachel was one decision. It wasn't. It was a pattern I established, a template for how I'd handle anything difficult for the next 30 years. So, what actually matters? What did I finally learn after wasting decades on running? Truth is almost always kinder than silence. Not comfortable truth, real truth. The kind that makes you vulnerable and might make people angry, but at least gives them something to work with. Closure is a gift. Even if the closure is, I'm not strong enough for this relationship, or I choose my marriage even though I have feelings for you, that's infinitely better than disappearance. People can heal from rejection, they can't heal from being erased. And here's the part that took me longest to understand. You're not protecting anyone by avoiding hard conversations. You're just protecting yourself from discomfort. When I finally understood this, really understood it, I was 64, almost 40 years too late for Rachel, 24 years too late for my marriage, 15 years late to help Emily. But I stopped running, started having the uncomfortable conversations, told Emily the truth about Rachel, apologized to my ex wife for years of emotional cowardice, started showing up honestly even when it made me look bad. And you know what? The world didn't end. People were hurt by my honesty sometimes. But hurt is different from damage. Hurt heals, abandonment damages. Let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about your answer. Who are you avoiding right now? What conversation do you need to have but keep postponing? What ending needs closure that you're just letting hang in? Silence. Maybe it's a relationship that died but you never officially buried. Maybe it's feelings you have for someone you shouldn't have feelings for. Maybe it's an apology you owe for something years old. Maybe it's truth about yourself. You're hiding from someone who deserves to know. If you're holding on to that right now, thinking you'll deal with it eventually, let me tell you what eventually looks like. It's being 76 years old and finding out someone died and wondering for the rest of your life if your cowardice contributed. It's watching your daughter struggle with the same patterns you established and knowing you could have broken the cycle. It's living with a constant low level shame that colors everything you do because you know you're not as decent as you pretend to be. Stop ghosting people, literally or emotionally. Stop disappearing when things get hard. Stop avoiding conversations because they're uncomfortable. Start telling the truth, even when it makes you look bad. Start giving people closure, even when it's awkward. Start owning your choices instead of vanishing from them. Start having the hard conversations now instead of carrying them as regret for decades. Start choosing temporary discomfort over permanent damage. Start understanding that running from conflict doesn't make it disappear, it just makes it metastasize. Start treating people's need for closure as more important than your need for comfort. Start being the kind of person who shows up honestly even when it's terrifying. I'm 76 years old. If I'm lucky, maybe I have 10 more years. Probably less. My knees barely work. My memory is going, but I'm finally, for the first time in my life, living with integrity. Not because I figured out some great wisdom, because I run out of time to keep lying. I speak at Rachel's grave every year on the anniversary of her death. I don't know if she can hear me or if it matters, but I tell her what I should have told her in 1986, that leaving her had nothing to do with her worth and everything to do with my cowardice, that she deserved better, that I'm sorry. My relationship with Emily is finally honest. It took years to rebuild after I told her the truth, but now we actually know each other. I'm not performing being her father anymore. I'm just being honest about who I am, mistakes and all. And it's better, everything is better when you stop running. Here's the irony. I spent decades trying to protect my image, and now in my 70s, when I finally stopped caring about looking good and started telling the truth, people actually respect me more. Not because I'm impressive, because I'm finally real. You have a choice right now. Keep avoiding the hard conversations, ghosting the difficult moments, running from conflict, or face it, have the uncomfortable talk today instead of carrying it as shame for 40 years. I can't go back and save Rachel, can't undo the damage I did to my family. But maybe if you hear this and it makes you pick up the phone and have that conversation you've been avoiding, maybe that's something. Don't be 76 years old, standing at a grave, apologizing to someone who can't hear you. Be brave now. Tell the truth now. Face the discomfort now. Because I promise you, the pain of honesty is temporary. The pain of cowardice lasts forever. If this made you think of someone you need to talk to, go do it today. Tell me in the comments what conversation you've been avoiding. Maybe saying it out loud will help you face it. Subscribe because I'm not done telling you the truths I learned too late. The clock is ticking for all of us. What are you running from?